Thank you for joining me today for this brief walkthrough on how you can meet the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and move on when reading requirements that your K-3 core reading program be evidence-based. This video will provide a brief overview of ESSA, the 4 levels of evidence defined by ESSA, and 3 options for how you can support that your core reading program is evidence-based. The Every Student Succeeds Act is the federal law that allows the U.S. government to support both national and local educational goals with grants and other resources. ESSA is the latest version of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, and it replaces the No Child Left Behind legislation. ESSA empowers states to better identify and support the needs of their schools. Beginning with the 2017-2018 school year, the K-3 core reading program used by schools must now meet the ESSA criteria for being evidence-based. ESSA has 4 levels of evidence. While the preference is that your core reading program eventually meets the requirements for a strong, moderate, or promising evidence, which you can see in Category 1 of this slide, during the first year under ESSA regulations, your program can be approved by meeting the strong theory or rationale level, as shown in Category 2. The focus of the evidence level is as follows. Strong, moderate, and promising evidence all demonstrate a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes. Strong evidence does this through a well-designed and well-implemented experimental study. Moderate evidence does this through a well-designed quasi-experimental study. And promising evidence does this through a well-implemented correlational study with controls for selection bias. The 4th and lowest level of evidence, often called the strong theory or rationale level, provides research and data to support that the program is likely to improve student outcomes. While the rationale level of evidence does have some support, it is incumbent upon schools to eventually provide promising, moderate, or strong evidence for its selected core reading program. Evidence-based programs have proven results that are supported by a valid research base. The documented effectiveness and validity of these programs allows them to be used consistently over time, avoiding the carousel of a new initiative every year that is sometimes found in education. Additionally, because the programs have research and data to support that they are positively impacting student outcomes, they have a higher return on investment, and they maximize instructional minutes in class. This proven ability to improve student outcomes will help support a culture of achievement in a school, which will build trust among students, faculty, and parents. We will now review 3 options for establishing that your school's core reading program meets the ESSA requirements to be considered evidence-based. Option 1 is the simplest path, and it should be available to the majority of schools across Arizona. For this option, you simply need to visit the website for the vendor of your core reading program to find if it has already provided support that its program is evidence-based. You can also call your vendor to have them send you this support directly. Here's an example of a vendor that has made it easy to find research to support that its program is evidence-based. Now, even though we are using this vendor as an example, the ADE is in no way endorsing a specific vendor or program. This is just a really nice example of how you can find support for your core reading program online. I began my search by looking up the vendor for my example program, which is Reading Street from Pearson. On Pearson's website, at the bottom of the page, you will find a topic marked Every Student Succeeds Act, which I will click now. Upon clicking the ESSA button, I am taken to this page, which shows the program Reading Street and has a button for a research study. After clicking the button, I am taken to a study that shows that the program meets the requirements for a strong level of evidence. I can simply copy a link from this study and paste it into my literacy plan to provide the required support for my core reading program. As is the case with numerous educational companies, this vendor has made it easy for schools to find and provide the support they need to illustrate that their core reading program is evidence-based. Since ESSA is national legislation, the onus is on vendors to provide proof that their program positively impacts student achievement. Once you have obtained the link to the research that illustrates that your core reading program is evidence-based, you will provide it to the Move On When Reading team via your literacy plan. Simply click the Add Program button on the Core Reading Program section of the plan. Then click Add Other Core Reading Program, which is found here. Then, copy and paste the link to the validating study into the Program Review field below. This will provide the Move On When Reading team with the link to the validating research, which will allow the team to then approve your core reading program. If your vendor is unable to provide direct support of the effectiveness of its program, we encourage you to speak with them directly. Since ESSA is national legislation, it is a common expectation that vendors are able to provide evidence that their programs improve student outcomes. However, even if your vendor can't provide the needed research, you can still gather research of your own to support the effectiveness of your core reading program. When you are looking for research for your core reading program, a good first stop is the What Works Clearinghouse. This website, from the National Center for Education Evaluation, reviews existing research on different programs, products, and practices, and provides educators with information they need to make evidence-based decisions. As an example, the site lists numerous reading programs that it has reviewed, as you can see in this image. By clicking on one of the programs at random, and I want to remind you that the use of this program as an example is in no way an endorsement by the ADE, I can see the studies that What Works has gathered that show that the program has proven positive student outcomes. This is a great resource to find support for your program. However, the What Works Clearinghouse is not the only site of this type. Another option is Evidence for ESSA. This site, like What Works, lists programs and provides supporting research to show if the program is evidence-based and if it has demonstrated positive outcomes for students. As I did before, by selecting a program, I can readily review the research that supports its effectiveness. If you are unable to find direct support for your specific program, you can still gather your own research on elements of that program to illustrate its effectiveness. A great place to start to gather your own quality research is Google Scholar. Google Scholar searches sources such as scholarly journals, dissertations, and government reports from all around the world. You can tailor your searches to focus on specific topics, time frames, and types of sources. This will help you research the elements of your program. For example, an effective core reading program must address the 5 pillars of early literacy: phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. If your program addresses all 5 areas, you can gather research on each area to show that this is an effective approach to reading. As an example, I have entered phonics instruction into my search. One of the first links is to the findings of the National Reading Panel. While I would normally choose more current research, these findings are from a foundational and reliable source on early literacy, so they can help me build my overall support for my program. When compiling your own research, it is important to keep in mind the qualities of an effective study, which include a randomized control trial, meaning that there is a control group and an experimental group that are made up of students that are similar, so that you minimize the impact of other variables on the results of the study. It should have a sufficient sample size between the control and experimental group so that a true trend can be extrapolated from the data. The study must, of course, show statistically significant impact on student achievement. It must be replicable, it should be peer-reviewed, and it should have a strong correlation to your program. This means that the groups in the study should be somewhat similar to your students. For example, a valid study may not apply to your school if the populations are dramatically different, as other variables may be involved in the results. As you did with option 1, you would enter the headings and links to your findings directly into your school's Move On When Reading literacy plan. Once again, you will paste the links to your studies directly into the program review section. If you are unable to obtain research from your vendor, from a source such as What Works Clearinghouse, or from your own research using Google Scholar, you do have a last option for supporting that your core reading program is evidence-based. It is important to note, though, that an absence of research supporting your program is a strong indication that you may need to review its effectiveness. For this option, you can provide at least 3 years of current literacy data that supports that your core reading program has positive outcomes on student achievement. Providing this data would establish your program at the lowest level of evidence, the rationale level. This will suffice for the first year under ESSA, but the expectation is that you will find supporting evidence for your program so that it moves to the promising, moderate, or strong level by the following year. For your data to be sufficient, it must illustrate that use of your selected core reading program is promoting student achievement or maintaining an already high level of student achievement. If you choose to provide literacy data to support your program, please use the format provided on this slide. Additionally, please notify the Move On When Reading team prior to emailing them with this data so they are prepared to receive and integrate the data into your literacy plan. You can reach the Move On When Reading team at moveonwhenreading@azed.gov. The ESSA legislation is designed to prompt key conversations among educational stakeholders. As you review your program to establish that it is evidence-based, ask yourselves, what is the body of research to support that our program is effective? What data do we have to support that it is working? What do we need from the vendor of our program to help us better understand and use it effectively? And if sufficient data and research are not available, what is our next step? Do we move forward with a program that we can't prove is effective? Now, these aren't easy questions, but they're vital to ask to prompt the kinds of conversations that lead to an improvement in student achievement. Thank you for listening to this presentation on establishing that your core reading program meets ESSA requirements to be considered evidence-based. This recorded presentation, as well as many other resources for Move On When Reading, are available on our website, azed.gov/MOWR. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Move On When Reading team, which is made up of Destiny Chiarello and me, Sean Ross. You can best reach us at moveonwhenreading@azed.gov. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all that you do to support K-3 literacy for students across Arizona.